What's up, everyone? Today I'm going over the evidence that supports the Bible as a historical document with other outside sources. The first question most people have about the Bible today is whether or not we have an accurate copy of what the original would have looked like. This question is usually raised with an objection of what we call the telephone game, where one kid would give a verbal message to the next kid and down the line. But by the time you get to the end of the line, the message is completely different than what the original message was. If this is the case, how can we believe a book that has been doing this for over 2,000 years? Fortunately, the New Testament was not made this way. Since it was not told to one specific individual, then spread, one by one, we can conclude the analogy of the telephone game does not apply. There are numerous eyewitness accounts in the New Testament and outside of it. We also must remember the New Testament is not one book, but it is 27 books written by around 9 different authors. However, we have never discovered an original copy of the Bible. So what gives? Many argue we can still know what the original said because of how many copies we have. There are about 5,800 handwritten Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. Also, there is 20,000 manuscripts in other languages like Latin and Arabic. Some are complete Bibles, while others are books in the Bible, and some are just chapters or even verses that are in the size of credit cards. There is no other historical document of antiquity with this much manuscriptural evidence or documentation. The closest in manuscript value would be the Iliad by Homer, with only 1,800 manuscripts. Other historical people have less than 20 manuscripts about them. For example, Caesar and Plato. Now some may say, yeah, that's great, but the New Testament was written so far, it was written too far from the time of Jesus. They might even try to say that it was written 40 years or more after the event happened, which is true. But to say this, I think, would be a misrepresentation of what we use as historical evidence. I would say the person is mistaken. While it is true, certain books are dated to be written anywhere from 50 to 90, some even try to say 100 or 110 AD. As we know, Jesus' death and his resurrection are to be dated somewhere in the range of 33 AD. Now this is still really early sources compared to other historical works. For example, the time frame of Homer's life and the book Iliad written down was 400 years. The time gap between Plato's life and his biography was 1,200 years. The gap for Caesar's life and his written documentation was 1,000 years. The time gap for Herodotus was 1,400 years after his death. Again, the New Testament was written anywhere from 40 to 60 years after the death of Christ. If we see Plato and Caesar and Herodotus as historical figures and their life attested to accurately, why would we not conclude the same for Jesus? Now maybe you'd say, well, the Bible is a biased source. I'd again say you are wrong, but for argument's sake, let's say you are correct. We still would know what Jesus' life was conceived of. How, you may ask? Well, because we have extra biblical resources that confirm all of the ideas that the Bible states. People who were not Christians confirm the Christian beliefs. For starters, let's look at Thallus. Thallus is probably the earliest secular writer to mention Jesus around 60 AD. His specific writings are gone, however. Julius Africanus quotes Thallus in 221 AD, trying to explain the darkness occurring at the crucifixion of Jesus. We also have Tacitus, who confirms many stories within the Bible, like Jesus living in Judea, being crucified, and his followers being killed for their beliefs. Then we have Marabar Seraphim. This man was a philosopher who was writing to his son while comparing his life to the persecution Jesus received. He refers to Jesus as a wise king and confirming Jewish leaders were the advocates for Jesus being crucified. We also have Phlegon in 80 to 140 AD, and he too mentions the darkness at Jesus' crucifixion. Ironically, an early church member by the name of Origen confirms this by quoting Phlegon, probably because he had no access to a true Bible yet, since obviously there was no way people could have owned a Bible in this specific time in history. Pliny the Younger, in 61 to 113 AD, describes the early church of Christians. He says the early church believed Jesus was God, held a high moral code, and the people met together a lot to worship Jesus. Not to drag this section out too long, the point here is to realize that Jesus is attested to in even non-biblical texts. Most scholars say there is around 30 independent sources of Jesus. Here are a few more names if you would like to research them yourselves. Lurian the Samosata, Celsus, Josephus, and the Jewish Talmud. Now to my main point. This shows that we have a story congruent with the New Testament even if you've never picked up a Bible. According to all of these names, scholars have concluded on these facts about Jesus' life. Number 1, Jesus existed and lived in the Jerusalem area. Number 2, Jesus' ministry brought lots of attention that eventually led to his death of crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. Number 3, he was placed in a tomb. Number 4, on the third day the tomb was empty. Number 5, Jesus' disciples and many others claim to have had post-mortem appearances of the risen Christ, including skeptics like Saul and James. Now these facts alone do not prove Jesus truly rose from the dead. For all we know, they could have hallucinated. However, I would argue when looking at these facts, we would have to explain away these facts. My belief is that the resurrection is the best explanation of these facts. The theories about the hallucination ideas and the stolen body theories have failed to explain away all of this data. The resurrection is the only explanation that fully makes sense to all of these data points we mentioned. That should wrap it up for now. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more content like this, and let me know what you think in the comment section below.